sort of cruising right into summer. So,
Well, this might be a bit tangential on that, but that's fuel for fires later on in the year because it was such a wet year the last 2 years. And I'm going to tell you, I read the article on Maven's Notebook, California Water News, the UC Davis study. About 70% of California was blanketed in smoke, and it had effect on the state's lakes. So that gives new meaning to, the old song "Smoke on the Water," Chris. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And it has effects, and not all of them are necessarily bad. In some ways, shading the rivers makes the temperature cooler, which is useful. But it also, can affect a lot of other things, like decreases in photosynthesis and the food webs and the growth of algae. There's a lot of things that need to be looked at there. Because it does change, the light and the temperature and the oxygen, and it's interesting, and smoke is. I mean, it's always bad. We don't like to see our forests go up in smoke. But I remember speaking to someone who was talking about how the smoke, though, as it comes up through the trees, it kills the fungus that grows on the trees. It's like smoke, wildfires and smoke is part of our natural forest ecosystem. The pine forest is sort of key, one of the key drivers of things in the pine forest. So it's interesting. Certainly we'll see some more research on that through the years.
Yeah. Well, one thing, Chris, I want to change the topic a little, if I can, just for a sec, or a few minutes. We always talk about Maven's Notebook, and some of our audience, subscribes to that, goes to it, looks at it, and some of them don't. Maybe you can give a brief synopsis, maybe like a mini vocal tour of what you got on what kind of things you put in there, and all the special little things people can find out about.
Oh, okay. Well, I think probably the main product that people come to the website for is for the Daily Digest, which is right underneath the slider, the sliding picture box is the latest version of the Daily Digest. And that is a roundup of news from all across the state. And these are news items that you click out to visit, and there's news from newspapers, from TV outlets. I mostly point people to print. I don't, really do a lot of videos, and so that's sort of a rundown. And there's a statewide section, there's a regional section, there's Colorado River section. And that is the news that's rounded up from all around the California and the West. And then on the main page, there's a lot of news now that is republished right there on Maven's Notebook, because a lot of people get annoyed with having to deal with paywalls at newspapers. I try to make as much available as possible through gift articles and unpaywalled links like at AOL News or whatever, but still you can end up running into a lot of newspaper paywalls. So if you don't want to look at the newspaper paywalls, then you can just go to the main page where all the stories that are hosted on Maven's Notebook are sort of categorized by topic, meetings, news, Delta stories, Colorado River, and you can sort of scroll down there, and everything on that page is posted directly on Maven's Notebook, so you can read water news without ever having to leave Maven's Notebook, the website, and no paywalls. So.
Yep. And you also have a summary you put out at like Mondays. You send a
Oh,
weekly.
yeah, that's my special newsletter for donors and sponsors, and where I cover the extra things that I don't usually that don't always make it out onto the website. Give you the rundown of everything that's coming up in meetings and events that week, and so that's for my donors and sponsors. So I work a little extra harder for them. So if you really want to get a lot of water news, then become a donor or a sponsor.
Yeah, and we are, and we love that, and that's where Chris and I get, Christavia and I get our news every single day, so that's a great thing. Well, you touched upon something about the Delta, and I was reading one of the stories you had in there about how the Delta pumps killed over 500,000 fish in 2 decades, and they said this year was even worse. Maybe you can give our listeners a little about that. I know they stopped, they put a ban on fishing for that, but what's going on now with this thing?
Well, yeah, there's been a problem where there was a large number of steelhead, baby steelhead. We're talking about the juveniles that ended up at the pump, and so that's restricted the amount of water that can be pumped from the delta, which is what's used for water supply for farms and for Southern California and the Bay Area and elsewhere. And so they've been looking at why these, what's been happening. And, I should also point out, okay, 500,000 over 20 years, 500,000 over 20 years, is not. I mean, that's not necessarily, I mean, it sounds large, but then it's over 20 years. I didn't do the math, but
do they classify that as collateral damage?
Well, yeah, what happens is that the fish get the pumps are located at the southern end of the delta. So when they turn the pumps on, all the water that generally flows out to the sea with all the baby fish in it, it kind of tends to turn around and head back to the pump. So they have some fish screens that keep the baby fish out of the pump. So if the fish are caught in the screens, then they end up in a bucket, and they pull these fish out, they put them in a truck, and they drive them off into the delta and release them somewhere, because like the pumps are sort of at a dead end, and if the fish are there at the pumps, they're very, very far off course. So this year they had a lot of steelhead that was landing at the pumps, baby steelhead. So they've done a lot of research, and they've been looking around trying to figure out why so many baby fish, baby steelhead, and in part that was because there was a very good year for steelhead production in the San Joaquin River system, and while we have a lot of ways to divert baby salmon coming down the Sacramento River to keep them from heading down to the pumps, we don't have as many of those things in action on the San Joaquin River. So that's why so many of those, that's one of the reasons why so many of those fish ended up there. So, the saga goes on.
Well, I know the farmers aren't happy. I mean, they're because the pumps delivers less water despite despite it's the second year of drought busting storms, and so the farmers aren't happy about what's going on either. So I don't know what to say. Everybody, you never can please everybody, right?
Well, yeah, and it is frustrating because it should have been a year when it should have been able to get a lot of water out, but this unusual situation with the fish showing up at the pumps has really, literally thrown a wrench in the system, so to speak. So but there is water there, and so it's actually a pretty decent year nonetheless. Although the farmers only getting 30% of their allocation are for certain not happy, and that's a real tough situation. Metropolitan is in pretty good shape, even with that 30% allocation. So that means Southern California has enough water, but that's because they have a lot in storage, and all their storage got filled up last year. So, they're doing very well due to investments in groundwater storage in the Southern California, in the Southern San Joaquin Valley, and the other investments that they've made. It's harder when you're a farmer to have that kind of backup.
Oh, absolutely. So what else is happening? Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Rob, let
Yep.
me can I ask kind of a tag-on question there, Chris? Because, and I don't know if you know this, so just say you don't if you don't. But when those fish show up at those pumps, right? I mean, what kind of damage? I don't know. Do you know we're talking about? Is it like hundreds of fish, thousands of fish, millions of fish?
Well, it was. I think it. I'm trying to remember the chart, but it was. I think about at one point maybe up to 20,000 in a day that
Wow.
had landed there. I mean, but it wasn't millions, but it was substantial, and we're talking these are endangered species, so we don't want and that was where the law sort of comes in. You're only allowed to kill a certain amount of an endangered species before you have to really cut back the operation. So that is why they had to cut back the operation. So.
Wow. Well, Chris, I know you had some other questions you wanted to ask Miss Austin.
Yeah, kind of interested in knowing a little bit about some, the backlash that we've heard over the years from the Delta conveyance system and all that sort of stuff. Has the federal government ever ruled on that? We got that question on the feed. I'm sorry, on the post a couple of weeks ago, and I forgot to ask you about it, Chris. Is it all state, or is there federal government involved in the Delta conveyance?
Yeah, that's a good question. When it was I think it was the California water fix, there was contemplation that there would be a Central Valley project participation along with the state water project. Now, the Central Valley project is the federal project, and as the California water fix went through the process, it just became evident that the Central Valley project, the federal water contractors, were not going to participate. So that then puts it all on to the state water project, and it becomes primarily a state project, not a federal project. So a state is subject to CEQA. Now, the feds don't get involved unless they have to, like if they're funding a project or participating in a project. And so since the Bureau of Reclamation, which is manages the Central Valley project, since they are not involved, that aspect of federal involvement is done. So the only other aspect is that there are levees in the Delta that would have to be modified, and levees that are part of the flood control system are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, and there are permits that you need related to the levees. So that's the only federal nexus with this project. So there is federal environmental documents being prepared, but only to the extent of that they're going to modify that levee to go. They're going to go tunnel under the channel or whatever. It's along the lines of what would happen, how the flood control system could be affected, but it's not on water supply or operations. So the federal government's involvement is actually very narrow in this case, which makes it kind of interesting because Congressman Harder, who represents the San Joaquin County, is really leading efforts in Congress to fight the Delta Tunnel, to quote unquote fight the Delta Tunnel, but there isn't really much of a federal nexus here to fight.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And the poor Army Corps of Engineers, it gets all this controversy and all this heat, and they prepared their environmental documents, but only in the limited way, and then they have this congressman saying, but you didn't consider operations, you didn't consider this and that, and it's kind of because we're not involved in that. So it'll be interesting to see. I can't see how the Congress can really they don't really have an in here that I can see, but we'll see what happens. If anything, it makes for good political posturing.
Yeah. That's right. Rob, I'm gonna say one more thing before I hand it back to you because, Chris, I know sometimes you repost some of the LA Times articles, but I'm gonna tell you the article from yesterday from the LA Times showing the 2-year before and after pictures of Lake Shasta, for example. They had other lakes on there, but the Lake Shasta one was just striking, right? May 2022 to May 2024, right? The bathtub ring is gone. That photo that was took by the Pitt River Bridge. I mean, I know you saw those. That's just awesome.
Well, yeah, it's really amazing. I just have to say that when you look at all the news articles every day, I've gotten really tired of Lake Shasta 3 feet from the top, Lake Shasta 2.5 feet from the top.
Yeah,
it's like. And Newsweek has been upping its game on the Colorado River, so they sit there and they're like, will the atmospheric rivers in California affect the level in Lake Powell? No. So then that, it's, I don't know.
You should offer them a subscription so they can find the truth out. Hey, but
they're quite truthful, but they're just like every 3 days they're writing a story about the level of Lake Powell. Like
it's just like having dead airtime on the radio. They got to fill the space with something. So, well, really, what really caught my eye today was the story you have about a 1950s era 293-foot ocean liner that's sinking into the Delta.
Oh yeah,
and it's leaking.
I saw that.
Yeah, tell us all about that, because that's the first time I ever heard of that being there.
Oh, gosh, abandoned boats in the Delta. It's really a problem. It's actually really a problem nationwide. If you have a boat that you don't want anymore and maybe it's not even seaworthy, getting rid of it is really hard. And
I can get a boat for free?
Yeah, well, actually,
it's like the ponies on the Indian reserves, right?
Well, what they had this problem where I don't know who it is. It's the Division of Boating and Waterways had a bunch of these old boats down in the Delta, and so they put them up for auction. And so, like, crack addicts, literally could buy these old decrepit boats for $1 or $10. So then they're taking these boats out onto the Delta and parking them wherever and cooking up their stuff and and then they get abandoned, and they're all over the place, and it's been a real problem. And this is one that I guess that I think that this one, just the ownership just passed recently to the guy that owns it now, but it's been sitting there, and yeah, it's one of many. It's abandoned boats. It's really a problem, and it's messy, and it's expensive. And a lot of times, with the owners of these boats, don't have any financial means to take care of them. There's some old rusty, oh gosh, the kind of big old crane that you would build a levee with, like a big clamshell dredge. Some is sitting out there rusting. The guy that owns it is like, some homeless guy. Like, so it just sits there and rests, and yeah, another problem we could solve with money, but it's very hard to find money to solve those kinds of problems. But yeah, if you you have a boat you don't want, unfortunately the Delta is a great place to get rid of it.
Interesting. Never knew that was a problem there.
There's an old saying, Rob. If you've ever had a boat, then you have a boat you don't want.
Yeah.
Well, they had one spot where they found a whole bunch of cars. Like, if you want to get rid of a car, and even some of them they found had bodies in them. They were dredging them out. Over at south of Stockton somewhere. Like, wow. There was a whole graveyard there. So, it's a very remote place. And some people take advantage of that, unfortunately.
Wow. Well, stranger things can happen. In my day, when you wanted to get rid of cars, they'd just drive them down to a bad neighborhood, leave the doors open with the keys, or drive it into Mexico and leave them there. That was the big thing back in the 60s and 70s. So I guess stuff like that still happens. So, but anyway. Chris, we appreciate you coming on every week. And for our listeners, if you go to mavensnotebook.com, and that's the website that Chris was talking about earlier, it's an awesome way to get the most important news you can and what's happening around California. You can also become a sponsor, as she said, and that's a good thing, keeps her going, and because she puts in those 90 hours a week, and I don't know how she does it, but she does it. Yeah. And it's a great way for Chris Davey and I to get our information every single day, and it's a really, really good way. And she's connected to everyone. I mean, everyone in the business. So she gets the inside skinny to some of these stories that other people don't. So, Chris, thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week, and you have a good weekend.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
All right.
Have a great week, Chris.
We're going to take a little break and our commercial sponsors, and then we'll be back with a featured guest. That's going to be a great conversation with this person, and I'm very anxious to do that with Mr. Davey. So stick around. We'll be back in just a moment.
KCAA Loma Linda. The Legacy KCAA 1050 AM and Express 106.5 FM.
Are you presently part of the irrigation industry as a worker or business owner? Do you want to learn how you and your staff can boost your knowledge and productivity? Then you should check out Irrigator Technical Training School. Irrigator Tech is the leading source of quality instruction serving all facets of the irrigation industry. Their courses provide a basic, easy-to-understand approach that raises the skill level, competency, and professionalism of landscape and irrigation personnel through practical education and services. Irrigator Tech combines classroom and real-life hands-on training, leading to a well-recognized certification that both customers and employers demand. Irrigator Tech's specialized courses can help you quickly become a certified irrigation auditor or a certified installer, repair, maintenance, or backflow technician. Courses also include certificates in smart water application or becoming a certified tree worker. Most importantly, all certifications are state recognized, and Irrigator Tech offers annual renewal classes to help keep your certification up to date. So whether you work in California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, or Arizona, there's an Irrigator Tech class near you. For more information on how to jumpstart your career, call Irrigator Tech toll-free 866-614-1755 or visit them on the web at irrigatortech.com. That's toll-free 866-614-1755 and on the web at irrigatortech.com.
Get ready, because the forecast for this May through June is a torrential downpour of points. SiteOne is proud to introduce our exclusive NDS Point Storm 24 event. Partners Program members who use drainage, hardscapes, and irrigation products can earn up to 4x the rewards in May and June for purchasing quality NDS products. That's 4x the points on a whole range of product solutions for residential and commercial projects. NDS is a leader in water management solutions and is known for superior quality and performance, as well as ease of installation and extreme durability. You can count on SiteOne and NDS to help you grow your business. NDS Point Storm 24 from May through June. It's the perfect storm of points and performance.
KCAA.
All right, welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone. I'm Rob Starr along with Mr. Chris Davey, and we are the hosts, and hope everybody's having a good day. We have a special guest coming on right now, and this person was a colleague, a good friend. She was also the host of our Water Zone shows on agriculture, and we'd like to introduce this lady. Her name is Miss Ingy Bisconer. And in her 40-plus years in the industry, Ingy has left a mark in many significant ways. She's recognized as an expert, which I can attest to, and thousands of others, in microirrigation, and has been unfailingly generous in sharing the knowledge and expertise that she has. Always the advocate for sustainability and improved water and the resource use efficiency. She's been a leader in helping agriculture growers improve profitability. She's been a developer of key educational materials, and most recently is co-developing a software program that monetizes the benefit of efficient irrigation and then estimates the potential return on investment. But this year, she has been appointed the president of the Irrigation Association. So I want to welcome a good friend, a good expert in the industry, Ms. Ingy Bisconer.
Thank you so much, Rob. Your words are way too kind. I appreciate everything you just said. And
well, I can do it
it's
again.
It's really good to be back.
I can say it again and do something different.
No, I really appreciate it. And it's really good to be back on the show with you and Chris. I really miss hosting the Water Zone Ag podcast. I guess it's been a few years since I took early retirement from Toro. That was a lot of fun, but I know that you two are carrying on the torch, at least on the landscape side, I hope.
Yes. Yeah, we keep the torch lit as much as possible. They put a fire to our you-know-what so we can make sure we do it correctly.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to let Chris jump in. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, yes, the days at Toro were wonderful, but I have to say, post-retirement and semi-retirement and doing consulting work and now president of the IA, it's been a good ride. There have been so many interesting things come up. You know, I miss being inside the corporate walls with you folks, but there's been a lot of other good things going on in the last 5 years. And so I'm anxious to share them with you.
Well, Chris, you can ask her about her distinguished award she just got.
I will. Welcome, Ingy. Great to have you on the show. Ingy, I miss those days too. Way back then with the old ag segment and you and Mr. Paul McFadden doing that segment together. Yeah. Good old times then. But hey, so here's the question. You know, it's kind of, you answered a little bit of it, but what have you been doing since then? I know you've set up your own enterprise called Surf and Earth Enterprise, as well as serving on the IE board. And we'll get to the IE questions in just a minute, but tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and about Surf and Earth.
Yeah, thank you. Surf and Earth Enterprises is my consulting company. I chose that name because that pretty much covers the globe. Wherever I ended up, I could end up working, right? So, you got land. If you got land and water covered, you're okay geographically. No, but seriously, the consulting company has been really fun. At this stage in my life, pushing later 60s now, it's been a lot of fun to pick and choose what kinds of projects you want to work on. And there's been a few really good ones. One of them was being the principal investigator for the Irrigation Innovation Consortium a few years back, where we did a report, a study, and a survey of the industry to find out what the research needs were, and that was published, and that's available for everybody who's interested in knowing what are the gaps in our competencies and what research needs to be done in the industry. That's a great document. And then I had a lot of fun helping an old friend of mine, Tom Duvall, at the Almond Board of California. We had a kind of a cool little project creating a slide rule calculator, totally old school, the type of cardboard slide rule calculators that you put in your back pocket or, you have on the pickup dashboard. And
love it.
It wasn't all this electronic, new AI. It's not all that. It's old school, but it was really fun. One side of it, it really monetized the value of a poor DU system, so distribution uniformity. So if your irrigation system was messed up, that calculator helped you estimate what it was costing you in excess water and energy and fertilizer costs. And the other side of the calculator was a helper in scheduling the system. So it really meant for the Almond Board's members, the farmers, to help them schedule their irrigation systems, that they punch in what kind of trees they had, what spacing and flow rates of the drippers and so forth. This is for drip irrigation, of course, and actually sprinklers too, for broadcast sprinklers. It would help you understand what your crop water needs were and what your application rate was, and bingo, it would come up with an estimated hours per day that you should irrigate. So that was a pretty fun project. And then most recently, I teamed up with my dear friend and colleague, Jim Anschutz, who I have known since we were neighboring farmers in Bakersfield in the early 80s. So we've known each other over 40 years.
And you had him on the show a couple times.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Jim's a good friend. And so we are now co-contractors on a project where we are creating software for farmers to use that enables a moderately trained technician to go out and determine what the distribution uniformity is of their irrigation system. And then most importantly, if it's bad, and many of them are because they're old and not maintained properly, it translates that bad DU, just like the Almond Board calculator, but this is much more sophisticated. It's online. It's a software tool. It monetizes the value of water and energy and fertilizer that's being really wasted, money thrown down the drain, if you will, and foregone yield potential. That's the biggie as well. Not only the cost of the resources that are being wasted with a bad system, but how much yield are you foregoing by not having a properly tuned up system? So there's a whole process of interviewing the grower and the irrigation manager, and by doing that and taking many measurements in the field, so this technician at the end of the day can actually at the end of the morning, it is intentional to have this be able to happen in maybe a half day, little 4-hour sprint out in the field, and provide a report to the grower that says this is your estimated DU based on this protocol, which is a simplified protocol compared to many of the more sophisticated ones. But our goal here is just to find out whether you kind of have a problem or kind of don't. And then it translates that into how many dollars per acre are you wasting, and what is your ROI? How many years of money are you wasting that you could rather spend fixing the system, which means calling your dealer, having an estimate made of coming out and fixing the system, and them calling the manufacturer to order the material. So it's a win-win-win for everybody. The farmer will end up getting a better system. They'll end up wasting fewer resources. That's good for the environment, good for the pocketbook, and it's good for the industry, good for the business. So, if you're wasting $500 an acre and your typical ROI for an investment is, a year, you'd like to recoup money, you could spend $500 in that year and recoup it. So that's the way that report is structured. And so we've just launched the beta version, and it's through a nonprofit called Cures, who got a grant from the state of California. So this is state of California funded, the Water Energy Technology Assistance Grant, a WETA grant. And it is available right now for free to anybody. So farmers, the industry, anybody can use it to help them assess the current state of their irrigation system, and then more importantly, translate that number into something meaningful in terms of money and dollars and cents. So I encourage everybody that's interested in that to Google Cures, CURES, look at their website, download that program, and give it a spin. So that's been keeping me mostly busy, other than the IA gig, which is all volunteer work. But those have been some of the paying projects. And, of course, every now and then Toro gives me a call and needs help with something, and I'm happy to help with that too. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been really interesting.
Well, speaking of the IA, where I know you've been a member for a long time, and you belong to lots of different associations. But what do you think should be the goals now, or following the vision and mission of what the organization says? Where do you see that it needs to go in a more proactive way? I know they do a lot of things.
Yeah.
They take trips to Washington and meet with legislation and all of that. But even down to getting new members and converting the mow and blow people into being a real professional, a real water manager.
Yeah, so the IA is a lot of different things because it serves a lot of different people. I mean, at its base, it's a nonprofit, 5036C, which is a little different than a 5013C, which is kind of your normal nonprofits that serve society. We are an association that serves an industry group. We're a business group. And so that's kind of tax speak for, different tax codes and things for the money. But one of the things that we do, as you just mentioned, was we do advocacy, which means sometimes we go to Capitol Hill. Once a year, we do a DC fly-in and go advocate for our industry. The core goal of the IA is to, be the recognized authority in efficient irrigation, promote innovation and the industry's growth and all the decision makers, and advocate for the industry and speak with one voice. So if you have things happening policy-wise in irrigation, it's best to go together as an association, as a unified voice. So that's one of the things we do. It's not just trips to Capitol Hill. It happens locally, within the states, at the state houses. But that is one of the major things that the IA does, and that we want to grow and do better. So what we call our core values are advocacy amplified, to inform and influence. So a lot of that is informing folks that, irrigation is necessary to produce our food, fuel, and fiber efficiently in this great nation of ours, as well as our essential green landscapes. But we also need to conserve our resources to sustain the environment upon which we all depend. So there's some give and take there. I see our industry doing a good job, and going forward, I want to see us have the opportunity to do an even better job with that. So in addition to advocacy, there's also a key component of workforce development and advancement, and I think you already talked about that a little bit. That's training, education, providing a venue for people to gain knowledge and earn credentials, and that's becoming kind of a hot topic on the policy side too, of whether irrigators will need to be licensed in the future. That's just an emerging topic, so we'll see where that goes.
Do you think?
And then the third leg is really just let me finish with the core values. Those three-legged stool. There is the industry growth. Helping our members who are mostly manufacturers and dealers and contractors and farmers, academia, government. We have a whole host of different membership types, consultants. The technology providers. All of those are IA members, as well as irrigation consultants. Just as that was a conference I just went up to, their yearly conference this year, the American Society of Irrigation Consultants. That's really a subgroup of members of the Irrigation Association. But we need to help all of them, grow and innovate and help advance their technology so that people adopt them, help them build their brands. So, we're kind of a helpful marketing organization as well to our members. So, sorry to interrupt you, Rob. I just wanted to...
No.
Kind of three major things that we do at the IA, and it's a rotating position. Every year we get a new president. Me this year. I've been on the board for 5 years, and it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to serve the membership in this way.
Well, just to clear the thing, you didn't interrupt me. I interrupted you, and I apologize. It's not like we it's not like we used to do when we sat next to each other by the microphones and we can look at each other. It's a little different when we're doing it all remote. So I apologize for that. But one last question for me, and I'm going to turn the rest over to Chris. I know I've been with you at the CII meetings and things of that sort, and ASIC, and I know you're from the ag side. And my personal belief is that I would wish that the people who give rebates or grant money should give a lot more to the ag side, because one, we need food, got to have the food or we're not going to live. And I know I was with you a couple of years ago when you showed me a report on how if they gave rebates back for that, for the farmers versus the landscape of lawns, they would have saved a whole lot more water on that. Is that something that you and the IA are going to push for in the future?
Well, I can't say that that's necessarily that particular thing is on the agenda. That particular rebate program by Department of by MET, MWD in LA, midst of the drought. Governor ordered them really to spend some money to pull out grass. It's pretty lucrative for people to pull out grass from their homes. And, that little analysis I did was showing, gosh, if we put that same amount of money, on a per acre basis, we'd be saving a lot more money if it were devoted to agriculture. The problem is it's very difficult to identify where exactly the water is being wasted. Grass is visible. It's in our urban environments. We can see it. We know that we're probably overwatering a lot of it. It was a little bit of more low-hanging fruit, whereas subsidizing ag equipment or projects to help save resources, or what I like to say is water use efficiency, and that means get more crop per drop rather than just saving water per se. We want to get more out of the units of input that we have in limited land, water, energy, and so forth. So, the grant that I'm working on is kind of part of that. I mean, that is the state of California recognizing that we know that we have 2/3 of this country's drip irrigated acres. We do. In California, there are about 6 million drip irrigated agricultural acres in the country, and 2/3 of them are in California because of our climate and our crop mix. So here we have these 4 million irrigated acres of drip, and many of these systems are old. They're 30 years old, 20 years old, or they haven't been managed properly, or they just need some help. And so the grant that I'm working on, that funds this project, will help make it easier for growers to find out, I didn't know that my system had a poor DU, and now I know that it does, and now I have an idea of why, and I'm a little more informed to go talk to my dealer or my banker to find out whether it makes sense to invest in that. So aside from that, yes, I know that some states will actually subsidize equipment. We have the EQIP program nationwide, and we have something called the SWEET program here in the state of California. And those have been very helpful too. Farmers apply for those grant monies, and it helps them adopt new equipment or higher tech equipment. But if I haven't said it once, I've said it a million times that it's not just the equipment that helps us conserve our resources. It's also how we use the system. So there needs to be education along with subsidized equipment. But that takes money too. So as Chris Austin was just saying, there's another problem that more money could fix. All sorts of things that we could that you can shake a stick at for fixing with money. But yeah, it'd be wonderful to have more money to help subsidize better equipment, upgraded equipment, newer technology. Certainly, converting from what is often inefficient flood irrigated systems, which we still have a lot of in the country, and still a lot in California, even on valuable crops. Those would be the low-hanging fruit to start with. I'm not saying that all of them need to be converted, but many of them are worthy of converting to, drip irrigation or micro sprinklers or jets or under tree sprinklers, all the nice pressurized irrigation systems that we have. But once you have that system, you also need to know how to operate it in order to be an efficient irrigator. I look at it through the lens of there's the system itself, and then there's the operation of the system. And it doesn't make any sense to be the best scheduler, the best irrigation scheduler in the world if the system is at a 40 or 50 or 60% distribution uniformity. That means it's got really poor gas mileage in a car analogy. And likewise, if you have a really great system that's at 90% DU, which is about as high as you can get, 90, 91, 92, it doesn't make sense to have a wonderful system if you're still operating it and turning it on for 3 or 4 days every 3 weeks like you did your flood system. So you need both, and we need to invest in both systems and education. And that's where I'd like to see the money invested, Rob. And I think the bureaucrats are listening. They know that it's not just throwing equipment out there, that there's the education too. So I'm hoping to see some grants here in the future for actual training and education as well.
Well, Ingy, more money and more time are kind of like the solutions to a lot of things, right? I mean, not just what we face in this industry, but so listen, I'm gonna shine a retrospective light on just a little bit, because you and I have been in this industry a long time. You've been going to IA shows since the 1980s. I started in this business in the 1970s. I'm not going to give that away, but and I've been
Ingy's 29.
Yourself, Chris.
That's right. I've earned that right, Ingy. But listen, I mean, since way back then, a lot of stuff has happened. The irrigation industry has turned a lot of corners. The Irrigation Association itself has turned a lot of corners. And I know you've got an exciting year already underway. But for the rest of the year, I mean, you're working with just a terrific executive committee there, Natasha Rankin, the board members. And it's a tough task, right? Because every year, every president's got to look at, well, how do I breathe life into this? How do I, do some more stuff? You've got the IA show coming up in Long Beach later on this year. Kind of what are you looking forward to for the rest of your term, Ingy?
Well, I appreciate you recognizing that we have a fantastic board, and we also have a fantastic new CEO, Natasha Rankin. She was hired just about 2 years ago after the previous CEO retired. Deborah Hamlin, you might remember.
Oh, yeah.
Natasha's, she is knee deep in it. She spent about 6 months listening and learning, and now she has rolled up her sleeves and is really really busy. We went through some rough times during COVID, of course. It's a transition time. This is a big transition time, moving on from post-COVID and post, the Deb Hamlin leadership to new leadership. And industry's changed a lot. There's been a ton of consolidation. What used to be 30 companies might be 5 now. All these little companies have been gobbled up into a few big companies, and I think that's really true on the landscape dealer and ag dealer, as well as the landscape and ag manufacturer side as well. So what I'm looking forward to is getting past this hump of what I'll call modernizing CIA and preparing ourselves for the next decade of growth, so that we can strengthen those 3 pillars I talked about, the advocacy, the workforce development, the industry growth, that we'll be able to do that more effectively with a better machine behind us, and moving on to have better partnerships with, allied associations like the ASIC, like the Agronomic Society. So it's a very exciting time, and I'm really looking forward to it. And we have a great new president coming in next year, Julie Bichelle, from Page Electric, and just a great board. 15 of us help Natasha and her staff. We help provide direction and hope that we stay on the right path.
Good. Where can people get a hold of you to use you as a consultant or to help them?
Sure. I have a LinkedIn site. I don't have a website, but if you Google Inge Visconer, INGECISCONER, in LinkedIn, you'll find all my information and my contact info. My email address is info@surfnurse.com. But yeah, I'm around. I have a couple of new projects underway. I don't have a lot of time right now, but I'm always happy to talk to people and always happy to help people.
Well, you got to come around again, and I told Natasha and her team, and I'll tell you, you're a wild woman, and that's a woman of water, and we appreciate that. So thanks,
Yep.
Inge. We miss you a lot, and we wish you the best of luck, and whatever support you need, we're there for you.
Thank you. You always have, and I appreciate the show. And to both of you, you guys take care. And thank you again for inviting me.
Thanks,
You're
Inge.
welcome.
Thanks for time.
All right, so as Chris and I always like to tell our listeners, if you would please help keep our planet blue, because if you like green, you got to have blue. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you next week. We have a great show coming up, so we'll see you then.
KCAA Loma Linda. The